All right, folks, so we're at the shop. I've got the hood up on the van because we're having a little bit of an engine problem. Nothing major, just EGR problem, or what I believe I've narrowed down to an EGR problem. We've been getting a couple of codes, which I'll go over in a minute, and then also the van has been running, specifically on the trail. I notice it'll run at low idle, really rough, and sometimes I get like a really intense fuel smell. So I have one of these OBD1 checkers. The van is a 94, so it has the 5.8 liter Windsor motor in it. So it doesn't have the OBD2, so I use the OBD1, and I've already checked the codes. So if I turn this on, you can see as I run through, I have a 552, a 327, 328, and a 332. So looking up those codes in the manual that came with the owner's manual and doing some research online, I've come to the conclusion that it is either the EGR itself, which is right behind this plenum, or the position sensor, or possibly the EGR control valve, which is right here and can be accessed behind the doghouse of the van. So I've already been to Napa, and I've picked up the 3 different parts that could possibly be the problem. Now, there is a bunch of tests that you can do to figure out which one of the parts is actually causing you the issue, but since the van's got 200,000 miles on it, I decided that I wasn't going to go through any of that. I was just going to replace all the parts. They weren't that expensive. It cost me about a couple $100 for all the parts, and hopefully that will take care of it. So you guys will be seeing in some videos, I have my sister-in-law's little blue heeler. I'm babysitting her while they are on in Vegas. She absolutely loves the van. She just lays in here all the time. We've already done a trip, which you guys will be seeing a video on, where I went with Donald and Edward Shin, and she's in that a lot in that video, so you guys will be seeing more of her coming up. So I don't know if you guys can see here, a few weeks back I actually did find that this vacuum line was broken. You can see I put a little piece on it right here to fix it. I think that might have contributed to the problem. It probably sucked in some dirt, and my first guess is that the EGR valve is what's wrong and it's getting stuck. So the first thing I'm going to do before I get started on the van and tearing apart is I'm going to use this can of ether and start the van, and then spray ether around all of my vacuum lines. I read on a forum where a guy was talking about if you have a vacuum leak anywhere, this is a great way to narrow it down, because it will suck in the ether and cause the van to rev if there's a leak. So we're going to check the van for leaks. If I find something, I'll bring you guys back on. Also, Megan is here working on her van and doing wiring. So she's got the new high top on, so she's got insulation going in, and right now she's working on routing all her wires for the electrical. She's going to have lighting and electrical power. All right, so I went around with the can of ether and I started spraying all the different vacuum lines, and then I decided that I wanted to actually get an idea of what I was listening for. So I pulled this vacuum line off here completely and sprayed ether right at it, and to be honest, I didn't hear anything. Maybe a very, very, very light engine rev, almost indiscernible from the regular just kind of noises the engine was making. So to be honest, I don't think I could ever figure out where a vacuum leak is using that ether method. So not going to say it doesn't work, just going to say it didn't work for me. So what I'm going to do now is just move ahead with what I had planned, and that is to replace those 3 parts. So I'm going to start with this one because it's the easiest to access. We'll get it replaced, and then we'll move around to the front where we'll have to remove some plenum. So I've been making a bit of a mistake all along. I've been pointing at this particular piece as the piece I was going to replace. That is actually not the EGR control valve. The EGR control valve is behind that, back over here. I was looking at the piece that Napa gave me, and I started looking at that, and I'm like, oh crap, they gave me the wrong piece. But then I started to realize that those vacuum lines going in were black, and the vacuum lines that should be going into this are green and white. So I did pull off the correct piece, and we're going to replace it now, but it is directly behind it. A little bit harder to access, but still not a bad deal. All right, so looking at the control valve here. What holds it on is two little studs, and then you got two little 8mm bolts. So just to help people out know what bolt that or socket you'll need to get these off. All right, so now we're going to go after the EGR valve itself and the position sensor. The easiest way to get through that is going to be going through here, and so we're going to take this off, and this just pops out like so, and then we can get to it. Still not going to be easy, but at least now we have some access to it. So we've had a couple setbacks, and it's actually the next day. So this is the new EGR valve that I'm going to be installing. I've been working on trying to get the other one out of the van, and as you can see, we've kind of moved positions here. But I've been trying to get the other one out of the van. So there is a compression fitting, there's a pipe that comes into this, and then a nut that goes over and fits this. That is a 1 1/16" wrench, and so that's what I have here. I did not have one of those yesterday, so I had to go to Napa and buy one. So that was part of the reason why we were on the next day. The other reason why is when I realized I couldn't get this off with the tools I had, I put the van back together so that I could drive to the store. Well, what ended up happening was I ended up breaking this fitting here when I was working on it yesterday, which is the quick connect that hooks your heater core hose up to your heater core. These can get brittle over time and break pretty easily. Now, the sucky thing about this is I thought I'd already paid someone to replace these a year ago, and now with further inspection, they only replaced the one that broke originally, even though I asked them to replace both. So this was the original one on the van, and if they would have replaced it like I asked, this would have never have happened. But anyways, so I'm going to have to add this to my list of things to do today, is to replace this, which I already did since I had to go to Napa this morning to get the tool. I already did get a new replacement for this. So just kind of be aware, if you're working on this in the van, you're going to be right next to those heater line hoses, and if you have these and they're brittle, they're going to break pretty easily. Other thing is, I also bought some of this penetrant here, and it worked so far. I have to say it worked awesome. I sprayed some of that on. It freezes and not just puts penetrating oil on it, but it also cools and kind of shocks the metal so that the rest can kind of break free. And it worked like a champ. I don't know if regular penetrating oil would have worked as quickly, but I sprayed this on, and I did manage to get the nut broke loose really quickly, and it's actually off. So I just got to take the last two bolts on, the ones that actually hold the unit on, and then I'll be able to get it out. Okay, so one more thing on getting out this EGR valve. So you're going to be taking out 2 bolts on each side here to get this out. They are going to be studs like this that you're going to take out. On the far side on mine, I took this nut off and thought that's all was there and that the stud was actually in the block, but there actually was 2 of these studs, and this was holding on was my transmission dip tube. That's being held on by a bracket, and that bracket is a pain. It's going to be in your way. So the only thing I could figure out to do was, and I don't know if you can see it back there at all, but I was able to kind of just bend the bracket back, and I couldn't get it to just move out of the way. I actually had to bend the bracket so that I could get a socket onto this stud to get it off. So that's kind of a pain in the butt. And then when you get it off, you know, you're going to have the old gasket, and I used a razor blade, just a small razor blade, which is right here, just out of a Stanley knife. I used a razor blade and then a small little wire brush that I just used by hand to clean up so that it would be ready for the new gasket. All right, so a couple things I want to note before I put this new valve in is I went ahead and put the position sensor on now, while it's easy to access and easy to get in there. The position sensor came with an O-ring, this one here, but I chose not to use it. I used the O-ring that actually came with the EGR valve because it looked more like the stock EGR O-ring, so I felt more confident in it, and it did definitely look like it fit better and would give a better seal. The other thing is too, there's a little metal plate that was on the over the top of the stock EGR position sensor, so I took that plate and put it on over that as well, because I believe that kind of helps put more even pressure down on the sensor and make sure it gets a better seal. But other than that, yeah, I'm gonna get this put in. All right, so we finally got the new EGR in, and it's all bolted in. Now, one mistake I made was I bolted the EGR in all the way and then tried to put the pipe on the clamp, or the pipe onto the fitting here, and there was not enough play for me to get it on there, so I ended up having to unbolt the whole thing off and then get it back on. I tried loosening it up and so that I had a little play, but I still could never get it to line up to where it let me thread on. I ended up having to fully unbolt it, so that caused me a lot of extra time and fiddling around. So when you go to put it back on, make sure you get a few threads on here before you start bolting this in. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and fix the radiator hose. I've got the new quick connect right here. I've got a pipe clamp right here, so I've cut off the factory end that was crimped over the old broken quick connect, cut it off with my William Collins folder, and so I'm just going to slip that on and then slip it back in, top off my radiator fluid, and then we'll finish putting the whole van back together. All right, so I've been driving the van for a week now. So far, so good. Everything's going great. We haven't had any check engine lights, and we definitely would have by now if it wasn't fixed. And no hesitation in the van's performance. It's been running great, absolutely solid. So one of those components definitely was bad, and replacing them, repaired the problem. But with that said, I wouldn't go about this again. You can do some checks with a voltmeter and a vacuum gauge and figure out exactly what component is bad. And with the van, specifically with the van, I would do that, because the EGR was a pain in the butt to get to. It's in that in-between spot where you really can't get to it from the doghouse, and it's not necessarily convenient to get to from the front of the engine as well. So if you don't have to replace that component, you find that it tests good, I wouldn't mess with it. It's a pain in the butt. But if you do have to replace it, hopefully this video will be somewhat useful to you, especially again, if you're dealing with an E350 van with a 5.8 liter V8 engine, the 351 Windsor. So anyhow, guys, that's all I have for you on this video. I'm heading out on another adventure as it is right now. And I just got back a little over a few days ago, I guess a few days ago, from an adventure with Edward and Donald, and they've already got their videos up. So if you're thirsting for some camping adventure videos, be sure to check them out. I'm going to link to both of those videos off to the side. My video will be coming up very shortly. I'm working on getting it edited, so be looking forward to that. If you found this video useful, please do give it a like. If you have any comments or questions, leave those down below, and we'll catch you guys again outside.